My name is Mariha Khan, and this week I want to talk about Islamic art and its influence on the Western world. Islamic art is obviously a religiously associated artwork, but it's not necessarily restricted to religious themes. So, what it really is art and architecture created by Muslim artists or in Muslim countries. It's a distinctive culture that's reflected throughout the Muslim world. So while all these Muslim countries are incredibly different from each other, their artistic themes and styles are an overarching way to connect these different Muslim countries, and for many people it's even considered a way of life. Islamic art has four basic components: calligraphy, vegetal patterns, geometric patterns, and finally figural representation. So calligraphy is primarily Arabic script, and it's a way to directly turn Quranic verses into works of art. And they can either stand alone or as an ornament in a larger piece of artwork. So over here we have three examples of Arabic calligraphy. On the upper left you can see a more traditional type of calligraphy that says Bismillah, and on the right you can see a more modern take on Arabic calligraphy, which is more geometric. And in the bottom, you can also see how this calligraphy can be very intricate and create a greater work of art within it. Next, we have vegetal patterns. These originate from Byzantine culture. So like much Islamic art, it's drawing from much older origins. And this is an abstract Islamic style. And so this Islamic style has influenced the term arabesque. This is a term that was coined by Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, and this entire idea of arabesque patterns contributed to the entire Orientalism movement. Over here you can see two examples of vegetal patterns. These are clearly tiles that would have been used in some sort of architectural way, but these kind of patterns can also be seen in stuff like pottery. Next, we have geometric patterns. So this motif is a very recognizable motif in Islamic art, and it is heavily included in architecture as well. There is significant contribution by mathematicians, astronomers, and scientists because it's a way that this artwork can work together with science. Geometric shapes are interlaced and overlap to create a more complex overarching motif. So on the left you can see kind of how you can begin to create these kinds of complicated geometric patterns, and you can also see how the mathematicians were able to influence this form of artwork. And on the right you can see a finished product. Another example is figural representation. This is much less prominent in Islamic art because Islam prohibits idolatry. This stems from the belief that creation of living forms is unique to God, and you don't want to be worshiping these man-made forms of people. While it is unique, here are two examples of figural representation in Islamic art. So it's more rare to see sculptural representations, which is what you see on the right, but you would often see figural representation in terms of storytelling. One great example of the influence of Islamic art in architecture is the Cappella Palatine in Palermo, Sicily. So I wanted to show a picture of the ceiling of this church because you can see a very distinctive geometric pattern. It's very similar to the one that we saw earlier. But if you view this church from another angle, you can see some more great examples. So over here you can see there are pointed arches, which are very distinctive in Islamic architecture. And then you can also see a geometric pattern on the floor, which, as we spoke about earlier, is another key component to Islamic art. Another great example of an influence in architecture in the Western world is, like I pointed out, the pointed arches. So on the right you can see a mosque in Uzbekistan that has these pointed arches. On the left you can see how in Gothic architecture they were able to draw from these Islamic influences to create these pointed arches. Another example is Pseudo-Kufic script. So Kufic script is a very ancient form of Arabic calligraphy. So over here you see in this Renaissance Italian work a detail of Mary, and in her halo you can see what vaguely looks like Arabic script. While it isn't actually Arabic, it's clearly meant to emulate the Arabic style. Similarly, on the right you can see another piece dating back to about the 1200s, and around the rim you can see what also looks to be Arabic script. While it is only there for stylization, it's clearly drawing from Arab influences. Another huge way that Arabic art and Islamic art influenced the Western world was the Orientalism movement. This was sparked by Napoleon's occupation of Egypt in 1798, and it was a way for Europeans to be more connected to the Arab world, which they normally didn't have a lot of contact with. So what they ended up doing was an emulation of Islamic and Middle Eastern art and culture. And while it's not a true copy of Islamic art, it was more of the Western world's idea of what the Middle East should look like. But in this sense, it was considered a caricature or stereotype of the Western or of the Islamic world. The Middle East was depicted as undeveloped and barbaric, which are stereotypes that we still see today. They also eroticized the women in depictions of harems and belly dancers. So what is the Orient? The Orient included modern-day Turkey, Greece, Middle East, and North Africa. So in this image you can see most of the highlighted countries, plus Turkey. So this is really what we consider the Arab world today. So this is a really famous Orientalist piece called The Snake Charmer by Jean-Léon Gérôme. And you can see all the major components of Islamic art are represented here. You can see the calligraphy. On the left you see some vegetal patterns. You see the pointed arches once again, and some geometric motifs. So while they are representing certain aspects of Islamic art, there really is a fantasy aspect to Orientalism. So what you see here is a young boy, a snake charmer, entertaining this group of old men. And what this really depicts is this idea of a Middle East where they're not working, it's not as developed as the Western world, and it's a very distinctive way that shows the way the Western world viewed the Middle East. Here's another example by the same artist. It's showing the relaxed lifestyle, servants that are helping these women in and out of the baths, a hookah in the background, and a depiction of these great baths at Bursa, Turkey. So what this really is a sexualization of these Arab women, but in fact what they're depicting is Western women in an Arab setting. So in the end, Orientalism is actually an inaccurate depiction of the Middle East. It's creating an exotic, mysterious fantasy of what the Western world thinks the Middle East should be like. And a lot of these are unfortunately very familiar stereotypes that still persist today. And finally, here are my sources.